Well, good evening, and welcome to Wide Awake News. You're watching the Alternative Energy Hour on January 28th, 2013. Appreciate the audience for showing up and showing your support for tonight's broadcast. Tonight's guest is someone I hope you'll find of interest. My guest name is Dr. Michael Castle. And he's specialized in environmental investigations and research of American, Canadian, and global air contamination operations, frequently referred to as chemtrails, for quite some time. He has a number of published papers, The Methodic Demise of Natural Earth, the United Atmospheric Prevention Act, which is a law that he's proposed, Reversing the Systemic Origins of the Pseudo-Earth. Dr. Castle's come on tonight to discuss with us a fuel source that he's developed and has tried to promote for some years. And without any further ado, I'd like to bring him on board. Dr. Michael Castle, are you still with me, sir? I think I heard your background noise rattling there, so I assume you're still there.
That's the pleasure of studio and home.
Ain't it?
Well, good evening, Gary, and thanks for having me on again.
Oh, it's a pleasure. You know, it is kind of amusing, I guess. You know, I think some of the folks who listen to this or perhaps watch it on Justin TV or YouTube probably think, you know, we've got $1 million studios, we're doing this, and all this, we got 15 gophers getting us coffee and doing our hair and makeup. You want to tell them how we really do it? Shall we let them take a look behind the curtain, or shall we just get right into it?
If you hear dogs barking, just ignore it. That's part of the turf. Well, anyways, I'm really pleased to be on your show. I talked with you a little bit about this one other time on one of your other shows. And as time goes by, and we have, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I developed something back in 2006 that I ended up calling casteline. Not gasoline, but it sounds like it. Just taking the first part of it. It started out as orangeline, and then, well, somebody said, well, why don't you just call it casteline? This material, in fact, uses a product of orange peels at about 13% called D-limonene. D-limonene is a natural hydrocarbon that is thin film evaporated from orange peels or lime or lemon peels, any citrus peel. And in fact, they sell it commercially, and it does work wonders as far as internal lubrication or lubricity when you mix it with alcohol. Ethyl alcohol was the one that I chose, and then I got very disgruntled about the fact that all ethyl alcohol or high-proof alcohol, in fact, was adulterated with benzene. They call it denaturing.
Now, why? Yeah, clarify. Why would they do that? I mean, we've heard for years. I remember hearing back during the Carter administration that the fuel of the future, what was going to save us from those evil Arabs who want to turn off the spigot and cut us off from the gasoline, the thing that was going to save us was our agricultural might, and we were going to grow crops for fuel, and alcohol was going to be this great fuel. Why would they put something like benzene in it? I mean, does it improve the combustion characteristics of the alcohol?
A small amount, but I guess the not being an attorney, but the legal response is because they have a tax on ethyl alcohol because that is the same as spirits. But again, there's a separate tax for that. So they don't want people guzzling this down. It is potent, but then they adulterate it with ethyl benzene or gasoline so you don't drink it. Then that,
of course, I know some boys who would probably think that's a pretty nice buzz and would drink it anyway, But that's,
we're human and we'll probably drink or eat anything, right? But the ethyl alcohol, in fact, that I want to produce is made from sweet potatoes, millet, and sorghum. Those are three readily grown crops in areas that really like the sweet potatoes, which is the core of why I want to produce this alcohol. There's all these wash trains in all these farmers' fields all over the Midwest, all over the Great Plains. In other words, sandy, loamy soils. That's perfect for growing sweet potatoes. But I'll defy you to get a stalk of GMO Starlink A10 corn to stand up in it, because as soon as it rains, it's going to fall over. Or even soybeans won't stop. So they got these literally millions of acres available that they don't grow anything on, and somehow or another the extension services gives them an exemption or money back or something because they got all these wash basins. Okay, well, if we put an end to that and just encourage these farmers to grow a cash crop of sweet potatoes a certain way and then harvest those, and they can do this and they can still plant their corn. It doesn't make any difference. But just plant all the wash trains in non-GMO sweet potatoes, sorghum, and millet. Now, these are
couple quick questions. First of all, why not concentrate on corn? Because that seems to be the crop that everybody seems to think is the great source of alcohol fuels. And why be terribly concerned about whether or not it's GMO if I'm just going to burn it in my automobile? I mean, why should I be concerned with whether it's a GMO sweet potato or a regular sweet potato if all I'm going to do is pump it into my gas tank and drive down to get a six-pack with it?
Okay, well, I guess the best answer to that question is, first of all, corn literally has no sugars in it. Well, to get alcohol, you've got to ferment. The sweet potatoes come readily available at 37% natural sugars and saccharides and secondary sugars. The sorghum and the millet, in fact, come the same way. They add to this bouquet of sugars, which you do not have to add amylase enzymes to get the conversion to the other form of sugars that they use to ferment. And it's such a sloppy, slow yield process anyways, and they use just tremendous volumes of groundwater in doing that. Okay, set that aside for a second, the groundwater issue. But the process utilizes amylase enzymes to convert these starches into sugars. Well, in that process, they do a lot of throwaway, and they use a lot more water in the processing of this into sugars that are fermentable into something that yields ethyl alcohol. But the process, in fact, is very slow in its yield potential. And conversely, if you use sweet potatoes, sorghum, and millet, or just take the sweet potatoes, this is done in a place called Tillsonburg, Ontario, Canada, and they will not use any genetically mutated anything for that reason, because all the fermentation materials are fed to animals or livestock. Well, we've seen the travesty that's occurred of feeding animals genetically mutated anything. They don't like to eat it, and it eventually, in fact, will take out part of their intestines by something called the generation of phytic acid. Now, and the glyphosate in the corn, in Monsanto's Roundup Ready corn, in fact, is very damaging even to the genetic sequencing of your own body when you ingest it. Okay, now I'm getting a little bit far away of the reasons why, but there's so many reasons why.
Okay, Dr. Castle, I'm going to have to ask you to hold up right there. When we come back, I'd like you to finish up your discussion of why should we care whether it's GMO if we're just going to burn it as fuel. You were getting right into it, but we got to take a commercial break, so we'll be back in just a few minutes, folks. Stand by. And we're back from our first break of the evening. Please do support our advertisers, as I continuously mention. Without them, we ain't got a show, so show them a little love. Now, just before we left, we were kind of getting into this issue. Okay, we're talking about producing a fuel out of agricultural products here. And if I'm just going to put this stuff in my gas tank and drive down to the local 7-Eleven to get me a six-pack, why the heck do I really care whether this crop that I'm making this fuel from is GMO or not? That's the point where we left off, and I would like Dr. Castle to pick up on that one, and please do deliver your argument on that one.
Okay, Gary, we were talking off air one at a time about do you eat meat, and do you care where that meat comes from? Oh yeah, I want to have organic, and I want to have range fed and all that kind of stuff. Well, folks, that's not what you're getting at your local supermarket. I can assure you that. What you're getting is something called DDGS, or distillers grains, that comes from all of the fermentation process after they extract all the alcohol they can from it, and it's fed to cows or chickens or pigs or horses. Pick one. I don't care what you eat. I know you don't eat horses, but that's what you're getting. You're getting the uptake residue of the same glyphosate that's in the grain itself. Whether it rots out their rumen or their intestines, I guess makes no difference. But cows, by observation, do not want to eat this stuff. Conversely, as in Tillsonburg, Ontario, they found out that this, let's just call it DDGS, even though it only has millet in it. Let's just call it distiller's grain from this sweet potato mash combined with sorghum and millet. That is, in fact, one of their premier byproducts coming from this fermentation process. And they can't make enough of this alcohol, or, I mean, they got 10 million gallon plant up there. They can't make enough of this, but because what it does when you take this into the feedlots, the mineralization cycle is complete. There is so much mineralization in the cattle and the pigs. They find out that their veterinary bills, medicines go straight down. Oh, that's not good for the veterinary and the pharmaceutical veterinary pharmaceuticals at all. But at the same time, what it does, it coincides with your ability to eat something that's not going to, in fact, harm you, nor is it going to harm the animal, and they almost have to force feed this stuff. That's exactly why Tillsonburg, Ontario exists. They will not use genetically mutated anything. Hooray! Well, in Ohio, for instance, years ago I approached them in 2006, just after my initial development of the casteline, and they would not talk to me at all. I even called the head guy at USDA and the Department of Ag in Ohio, and guess what? They're all controlled by the corn lobby. That's who it's called, the corn lobby. They direct everything that's done in agriculture, no matter who you are. You're not going to get in anything that's not genetically mutated or owned by Monsanto. I like the first name better. Now, these people are really something else when you look at what we're eating, and I hope you do sometime. I hope you look at what you're eating. But again, it's from the byproduct of the genetically mutated stuff, and you're going to be eating that. They're not going to throw it away. Conversely, if this other material, they gain weight faster, they develop good, nutritious fats, they don't have any of the almost atrocious diseases that the cattle and the pigs and the chickens and the fish that are fed the genetically mutated DDGS. So the distillers grain from this process here, which leads up to the casteline, man, it's galaxies ahead of where we're at right now and what we're eating. That is, in fact, the major problem of, I think, our species at this time. We're being fed literally poisons. Go look up that information sometime, folks, and you'll find out. Yeah, well, you've heard this before, but you don't want to believe it because, well, everybody else is eating it. Well, did you see the size of these people? Did you know that high fructose corn syrup, which comes from the same corn that you're making the fuel from, you think that doesn't have a forbearance on your genetic strain and the way you digest food? It's completely shreds it as far as being able to get nutrients from it. Matter of fact, it prohibits the nutrient cycle in your intestines, which is the only way you stay alive. But then again, if you're fed something that gives you good, solid mineralization, it is completely different. So as far as putting the cycle to the test, yeah, they put the cycle to the test. And no, we're not going to have any corporate media talking about this, but it's called CCSPEA, CCSPEA, and you'll find out that there's a wealth of information there about the downline products of just this one innovation, and I'm calling it an innovation. And I want to make an alcohol that makes a fuel that doesn't kill you in the process.
All right, I hear that bumper music playing in the background, so it is time to take our second break for the evening. I think we got the GMO issue pretty well sorted out. When we get back, I'd like to discuss casteline specifically. What makes it so much better than just plain old alcohol in my fuel tank? All right, folks, we'll be back in just a moment. Stand by while we have our commercials. And we're back from that break. Just before we left you for that break, we were wrapping up on the why GMO or not GMO, to GMO or not to GMO. And I think the argument was pretty much completed. But now I'd kind of like Dr. Castle to get into the benefits of using his casteline as opposed to just regular alcohol. I mean, if we were looking for an alternative fuel to run our automobiles on, one of the natural ones to use would be some form of alcohol, because, you know, it's been used successfully in internal combustion engines for some years, that it's not rocket science. Yeah, you got to make a, you know, there are some metallurgical problems and there are some fuel system issues. Some of the older cars, particularly, the alcohol tends to eat up their fuel systems. But people have run their automobiles on alcohol for quite some time. So why should I consider your process, Dr. Castle? What makes casteline superior to just running regular old alcohol in my car?
Well, as I said earlier, internal lubricity of the entire power combustion train, as opposed to the dryness of the short flame of a alcohol, in fact, is fairly rapid in response. I mean, it's almost instantaneous. It's almost a white flame, but that, in fact, has no lubricating qualities whatsoever. Conversely, if you use benzene, well, it's got, since it's an oil byproduct, it has some lubricity, but it also, in fact, such as toluene, which gives you a good octane rating, that would be your plus grade or even premium grade in most of them, toluene or xylols. That's going to give you some lubricity, but it's very short in duration. Again, the lubricity of natural oils from vegetable oils, you know, the oil that you can, one of the oil companies has one that you can run for 50,000 miles in your car before you have to change the oil out. That's because the natural oils from plants, and which this is one, and it is a hydrocarbon, meaning it will combust, but you're going to get all this lubrication during the combustion process itself. So in developing this, I seen the short, dry, almost instantaneous combustion of alcohol, and then I specifically developed a method of mixing the two together, and I got this brilliant orange yellow flame, and with no smoke, with no soot at the end of it. In other words, I was able to utilize this in a very unique way by adding it's not an additive, it's a solubilizer. It's beta carotene, which you also get from sweet potato peels. Matter of fact, that's exactly what I had used in the process, is sweet potato derived beta carotene or carotenoids. Well, this adds this lubricity, but it puts the alcohol interface inverted with the delaminine in such a way because it's almost solubilizing in it. And I do that with an ultrasonic mixer, which has no moving parts. But you put these three materials together, and you just stick this ultrasonic wand in it, and the frequency, in fact, mixes these two components so completely there is no turbidity whatsoever. And when it combusts completely, but it's that beautiful orange, yellow, brilliant flame with no soot at the end, thanks to the carotene. And the Swedish is the one that found this out years ago, that they can in fact make a biodiesel the same way.
It's sounding like a fairly complex process here. Now we've got alcohol, and most of us who were raised in the South have some idea how alcohol is made. I'm not going to say I've ever experimented with it personally, but you know, there is a family tradition. But needless to say, we've got alcohol, which is a combustible fuel. And it sounds to me like with the with the various vegetable products you're adding to the alcohol, we're getting into a fairly complex process here. Now, what is it? How's this going to impact the cost? I mean, one of the things that people are fussing about now is how expensive gasoline has gotten in recent years. I mean, how are you going to compete with such a complex process? How are you going to compete with gasoline? What are your thoughts on that idea?
Well, no, it competes very favorably with gasoline made in large enough quantities or even small quantities, because you can use this material in, because a reverse recipe, if you will, of the same, called a formula, but it's not really a formula. It's just these three components. You can use that as diesel oil. It works beautifully as diesel oil, but it contains 13% alcohol now, not just diesel oil, and it actually burns more rapidly, still combust with compression, but you're getting this self-lubrication aspect of it, which you can get that from diesel oil, but because of the flash points. But the lubricating aspects of it was so dramatic. When I started testing this in my old 96 Pontiac Grand Prix, I had 300,000 miles, 290-some thousand miles on it, and continuing to climb. I made this in my garage in Columbus, Ohio, in 5-gallon containers, and went out there and stuck it in my car and drove all the way to Richmond, Indiana, which was at the time the center of my business, and drove it back to Columbus. And that wasn't a very complex task. But I just noticed on the road, this old Pontiac just hummed along. I mean, it just drove on the road and you talk about getting and going. This worked like the most premium fuel, gasoline, that you could possibly buy. I mean, this stuff was close to aircraft fuel in octane rating.
Well, what about the impact on the fuel system? I mean, one of the problems we've had with using even E85 type alcohols is that it tends to deteriorate the fuel systems on some of the older cars. On your old Pontiac, did you notice any deterioration of the fuel system? That is one of the complaints that we hear.
None whatsoever. As a matter of fact, being a polymer chemist, I cut my teeth in what acrylonitrile butadiene is, and all your fueling gaskets are made of buna. And Buna combined with styrene butadiene rubber, which cheapens it. But I never had any of those problems whatsoever. I'm certain I had Buna with SBR gaskets in my car, in that Pontiac, but I never had any complications whatsoever, no swelling of, and of course it's fuel injection, but even in carburetor type systems such as the lawnmowers and all the array of things that this was tested in, no one ever had a problem because there's something called the solubility parameter. And when you mix alcohol and gasoline, you create this co-solvency. And it's this co-solvent of benzene and alcohol that, in fact, deteriorates all these gasketing materials. And that's why the E85 in particular is so damaging to fuel systems. But this here has a natural hydrocarbon in it, and Buna in with acrylonitrile butadiene and the styrene butadiene rubber mixed in with it. That's fine. This rubber does not swell even with that amount of alcohol in it. It doesn't form the co-solvent complex of benzene. And there's the co-solvency doesn't occur. Therefore, you get no attrition to the polymer chains and the way that it's put together, not even in the styrene butadiene. So this is a very unique concept.
Gonna have to hold that argument until after the break. I'm hearing that bumper music in the background. Folks, do stand by. When we get back, we will be entering our last segment of the evening. I'm going to ask Dr. Castle to reiterate the cost benefits of using this as a fuel, and then let him summarize his arguments for the evening. Stand by. We'll be right back after the break. Well, I tell you, this hour goes fast. We're already in our last segment with Dr. Michael Castle. Before we proceed, I would like to mention Dr. Castle's website is castleconcepts.informationsolve. That's INFORMATIONSOLV.com. castleconcepts.informationsolve.com. If you've got questions or you'd like additional information about what we're talking about tonight, might not be a bad idea to swing by his website and take a look. Now, Dr. Castle, as we left for that last break, we were kind of getting in a little bit to the economics of the thing. Now, I got to have alcohol. I got to have some carotene. And I got to have some of this orange peel extract. What'd you call that?
D-limonene.
D-limonene.
It's orange oil, but it's technically D-limonene.
Okay, now these three components that produce the fuel that you're proposing, these are components that are readily available. I can get them. Can you give us a little bit of information about how I might get the raw materials to try and whip me up a batch, just in case, I decided I wanted to take a 5-gallon bucket out into my garage and take a crack at it?
Okay. Well, again, I make no claims about where Sherwin-Williams Paint Company or their stores gets their alcohol, but I did discover that they do not denature it with benzene. So that was the first plus. They, in fact, denature it with a butyl acetate and just a small mixture of it. I think it's only 1%. But anyways, it worked perfectly with in the first trials that I done with the casteline, using a motionless mixer or a ultrasonic mixer. There is the not a problem, but there's where they're going to have to get something that is called an ultrasonic mixer. There's a company on the East Coast called Sonics, S-O-N-I-C-S, that have these materials available. They have these mixers available. It seems like they're kind of expensive, but the paybacks are real good once you see the performance of these, or you're just going to make up fuel because there's no phase separation in these whatsoever, even stored outside in the garage in the wintertime in the vehicles. There's no phase separation of it. It works perfectly. So because the solubilization parameter of this is very unique. Then you get the beta carotene from you can go to the store, you go to the drugstore, the health food store, and just buy you them little capsules of beta carotene, because that's only comprises of less than 1% of the total volume of it. Now that's a lot of them if you're making 5-gallon batches, but I did find myself a local industrial grade, if you will, of beta carotene or carotenoids, and it worked just fine. Third, Florida Chemical down in on right off of Route 27. If you remember where the old Donald Duck juice factory used to be, that's now Florida Chemical, and you can in fact look them up on the internet, get their address, and call them and order you 5 gallons of the D-limonene. Now it's going to be kind of expensive until you get into some type of volumes, but just to look and see if you can do this, that's the only 4 things you need to make this in your garage. And you can go out and put it in your car and drive away. Whether you got gasoline, it mixes perfectly with gasoline that's already in the vehicle. So you can, that's sort of on an emergency basis, it works beautifully. I had this costed out years ago at about $2.50 a gallon, and it just doesn't change unless it just goes down. Because the more people that use this type of material, once you get past the corn lobby, it doesn't change. And most of that is in taxes. And I don't see why this is applicable for taxes anyways, because it's not a fuel that they can claim that unless you're buying it from a gas pump, and of course you got to pay taxes on that. But see, folks, that's a problem that you're never going to overcome until this whole regime changes in these states. I already told you about the problem with the corn lobby. They get their cut off that too. So when it comes to making this, it's very, very simple. And thank you for giving out my website. There is some information on casteline up there under papers, and you'll see this strange little sketch. Well, that's the still. That's the still to make this casteline. Imagine that being about 30 some foot tall. So the diameter of that is very unique. And we don't use ground butter but one time. We always decant it off and we reuse it. It's just an exchange medium for hot water and then hotter water. That's all it is. But these are actually made in a fluoropolymer tube. And it's in fact all manned by a robot. I used to call it Robbie Tata Masher. He doesn't mash it, but he digs out all the DDGS after the fermentation process is complete. And then it lays down a 2/3 diameter, 1 inch thick, 1.5 inches thick of the same mash, if you will. And it takes less than 30 minutes to get all the way back up to the top after going this football field length pipe that's inside this unique contraption. Really, there's no moving parts whatsoever except the robot, which in fact is robotized, and in fact the top of the pipe itself in fact allows complete escape of the VOC and the water moisture vapor going out to the top, which is captured by a molecular sieve, and only the alcohol drops through. And that's already in production with the alcohol stills that are from the corn today. And it's a very unique technology that they have of molecular sieve adaptation. So all these things work. I thought there was a paper that I had written years ago on casteline. I see it's not up there. I'm going to get that and give it to my webmaster, John Francois, who's excellent, by the way. And he always puts stuff up. I guess I didn't send it to him because I'm on a laptop tonight, and all my other stuff is in my mainframe, which is not around me tonight. So I will get that up.
Couple items have come in from the chat room. Now, you touched on this one, but now once you've mixed these products, you've mixed the alcohol and the carotenoids and the delaminine, There is no tendency of these products to separate over a period of time. That you're not going to get, they're not going to stratify. They stay in solution. That is correct, right?
That is correct, because it's actually a solubilization of the hydrocarbon into the alcohol through the beta.
I think you also mentioned that you can indeed add a quantity of this mix to your gasoline if you happen to have, a little bit of gasoline left in and that seems to mix and run well as also.
That mix just fine with. I mean,
it was in the chat room as one of the questions that came through. Wanted to make sure we got that covered. I'm pretty sure you touched on it earlier, but the other thing is about the taxing situation. Now, a couple of folks have mentioned in passing that the taxes on vehicle fuels are intended to support the construction of highways and so forth. And right now, the politicians are pulling their hair out trying to figure out how the heck they're going to tax these electric automobiles that are starting to become more and more popular. So I would assume that at some point or another, we would have to make the assumption that if this became a prevalent fuel source for automobiles and trucks, that our local bureaucrats would figure out some way to squeeze us for a little tax money. I mean, they're always looking for every time they look at their constituency, they don't see constituents, they see sources of revenue. Would you comment on those items?
There was something called regulatory negotiation, and I like to negotiate this. Yeah, you're going to get an 80% reduction in carbon monoxide right off the bat because you're combusting D-limonene and not benzene. Conversely, you're going to get a tremendous reduction in all the carbon gases, including carbon dioxide. There's less carbon dioxide by this. As a matter of fact, when and I could not get the laboratory in Colorado to even look at this unless I had a state grant already, and they wanted $3 million just to test this. And I said, well, can I just pay for it myself? And they said no. They wanted a great big old huge state grant to pay for the testing of this. So you're boxed in no matter what you do. As far as the taxes, that's everybody's situation, but it is such a clean fuel. As a matter of fact, folks, you can drink this stuff if you want to. You remember the old adage of the Harvey Wallbanger back in the 70s? Okay, I do. I do not recommend that you drink this. But in fact, if you could, if you are given to that, yeah, you can. But at the same time, you're not supposed to drink moonshine. But I know a lot of guys out there that do. So it's just going to give you a different kind of buzz, if you will. And boy, your breath's going to be fresh and flowery, just like oranges.
It'll give you orangey breath.
It'll give you the orange breath, and you'll have an orange hangover. But if you take a little bit of sulfur, you won't have any hangover at all. But anyways, that's my contribution, and I cannot get it off the ground. Every way I travel, I get knocked down. I actually have a plan. I called it a fractal on how to import the alcohol from Tillsonburg, Ontario, over to the Bay of Sandusky, the Port of Sandusky, which is a free trade port, and they cannot tax this as a fuel coming on shore because it's not a fuel, it's a component of fuel. But since this is such a simplistic tech in mixing this, you have two inlet ports. One is beta-carotene and the other one is the D-limonene, and it comes on shore as a fuel, and then you truck it off. There will be somebody who will put an idea like that together. I appreciate the show and the time to talk.
I told you, this hour goes fast, man.
You didn't say it went that fast, though.
Oh, man, blinking, it's gone. To the audience, thank you so much for listening. I would like to mention that Dr. Castle's website, one more time, is castleconcepts.informationsolve.com. If you have additional questions, check it out. Once again, thank you so much. Charlie McGrath and Dex will be along right after the break.